What is up, and I welcome each and every one of you back to a brand new Civ 6 or Civilization 6 video. Hope you're all having fantastic days, and if not, hope I can make your day just a little bit better. But today we are coming out with a big project, the brand new tier list. That is right, we're going to be ranking the Chads and the Peeps, the Redditors and the Athletes, you know who I'm talking about. We're going to be separating the weak from the strong. I'm going to be giving an in-depth ranking on each Civ, their abilities, their strengths, their weaknesses, where I would rank them on the tier list from S tier to F tier, and how I would balance them if they are too strong or too weak. We're pretty much just trying to redo the April update, I guess, make Civs as close together as possible. But as always, if you do enjoy, feel free to leave a like and subscribe, helps me out a ton, and I do read each and every comment. These are some of my favorite from the last video, and yeah, I do really want to see your guys' thoughts on discussion. This is going to be one of these sort of subjective type videos in a way, and who knows, maybe you guys would end up changing my mind on some of these rankings, and this video would get too long if I put everyone in one tier list, so I'm going to do a tier list today and then a tier list next week, just for time's sake. But without further ado, let's get started with number one. Now, I am going to be going in order on how they appear on this sort of tier list website thing on Tier Maker, and starting off, the first Civ we're talking about is Germany, led by Frederick Barbarossa. Now, Germany is really the only original 20 Civ that is still insanely overpowered. They have immense abilities. Their Hansa gives them the highest production in the game. They get an extra district per city, which is huge, especially in the early game where population is not as easy to come by with the lack of amenities, housing, and growth options. The U-boat is pretty decent, I guess, in a naval type game, but all in all, it isn't the best unique unit. If they had something like a tank or maybe a medieval era knight or pikeman or something like that, they'd be a little better, but honestly, that is more than carried by free imperial cities and the Hansa. And just to put the cherry on top, you got Holy Roman Emperor, which isn't the best ability. A military slot is probably one of the worst, and combat strength when attacking city-states is helpful sometimes when you do want to take that sweet spot that the city-state has decided to spawn in. I mean, at that point, it is their fault for deciding to be alive in that instance. They're really versatile for any victory type. I am going to be giving them the S tier ranking. They are by no means the best Civ in the game, but you could never go wrong by picking Germany. Now, how I would change them is, number one, I change free imperial cities to give a military slot instead of the HRE, and so we'd actually remove the extra district that these guys can build, and instead split Holy Roman Emperor's two abilities into one per Civ ability and leader ability. The other thing I'd change is, instead of commercial hubs giving the Hansa 2 production, I'd give it so that commercial hubs give the Hansa 1 production. They'd still be getting a lot more production than usual, but without the free district, I think they would be a lot more balanced. The second Civ we are going to be talking about is the Netherlands, led by Wilhelmina. Don't get it twisted, she is an underrated Civ. Her trade routes allow her cities to be kept extremely loyal, allowing you to forward settle more easily than you otherwise would, especially on the higher difficulties. Trade routes to foreign cities or from foreign cities giving you culture is a nice add-on, but their power comes from their Civ ability, Grotte Rivieraine, the Great River. They get insane adjacencies for rivers, which evidently are very likely to be spawned near mountains, giving you insane production potential for campuses, allowing you to get higher adjacencies. Not to mention, industrial zones also love being next rivers thanks to aqueducts and dams, so with the Netherlands, you sort of have a more spread out Germany type ability. Instead of insane 20 production industrial zones, you'll probably only get 7 or 8, only 7 or 8, but make up for it by having better campuses. Not to mention, production towards the dam will allow you to get one of the best and most expensive districts for a lot cheaper. The polder is pretty decent on the surface, but it's so rare to actually find spots to put in the polder, especially on a Pangea map. One of the best naval units, dare I say, production combat strength towards defensible districts is absolutely huge, especially when going for an early war. They're really a jack-of-all-trades, master-of-none type guy. Early floods can cripple you since you will be starting near rivers a lot. Brought Rivuran is probably their only really good bonus. Everything aside from that is good, make no mistake about it, but it isn't anything game-changing that you want to revolve your entire game around. And for that, I am going to give Wilhelmina of the Netherlands the B tier ranking. They are a very good civ, and I wouldn't change anything about them. They're good as is. The third civ we're going to be talking about is my personal favorite, Macedon, led by Alexander, and that is War. They have two incredible unique units. The Hypaspis gets extra combat strength when attacking districts, the Hypaspis gets combat strength when besieging districts, and additional support bonus when defending. Hetairoi gives you extra combat strength when near a great general, and allows you to great generals a lot faster, as well as a free promotion. They are an absolute unit. You get no war wariness, which is nice, helps you keep amenities when destroying cities, and, when you conquer a city, it's going to get a lot of war wariness because, they've been through a siege, they're not really too happy, and it's difficult to keep them. Not Alexander, cities do not incur war wariness, but the better ability is the fact that military units heal completely upon the city capture with a world wonder. If your units are low and you're worried about losing them, just take a world wonder. It's that simple. And on the higher difficulties, when the AI does get a lot more wonders, this ability is super strong. Everyone around the map, pretty much the Dothraki in Season 8 of Game of Thrones. You think they're wiped out? Nah, they multiply within fraction of a second, and they're right back at it in the next episode. Hellenistic Fusion giving you Eurekas and inspirations when conquering cities, and the unique barracks replacement giving you science equal to a quarter of the unit's cost. The one problem I see for them is really no gold at all in their unique abilities, and due to the fact that you're going to be wanting to spam out as many units as possible, it is very difficult to actually keep up in maintenance costs, and a lot of the times you are going to have to beeline commercial hubs, or you're going to be in the super negatives in money. I'm going to put them in the S tier. They do one thing, but one thing can be used for science as well, and that is domination. Being able to keep up in science and domination is sort of a positive feedback loop where the more cities you conquer, the more science you get, the better the units you get, the more cities you conquer. So I'll put them in the S tier. I will put them under Germany due to the fact that Germany is a lot more versatile than Alexander, but make no mistake about it, they are both menaces. And now the fourth civ we are going to be talking about is Chandragupta, or as I like to call him, Chadragupta, because with these bonuses, he is, he's not that good, honestly. His territorial expansion is by far the best declaration of war. Casus Belli bonus, 2 movement speed and 5 combat strength is amazing for 10 turns. The Varu is very strong, but very expensive, and normally that wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. It's not Marianu Chariot Archer expensive, but the problem is the fact that if the AI builds walls, you are completely boned. Like, the Varu's a great unit, make no mistake about it, but the fact that it's expensive means you can't push them out fast enough, and if the AI gets walls, that's gonna be a problem. So India's sort of in this, sort of state, I suppose, where the Varu is super early on, their territorial expansion civic is super late. You don't want your cities to grow very fast because with all the cities you're going to be getting with the domination playstyle, the population will make amenities untenable even with the Dharma ability. So all in all, I am going to put them towards the C tier. I mean, they're decent, I guess, but the fact that their abilities don't synergize too well is kind of a problem. The one thing I do to improve them is that Varu do full damage to walls now, so that they don't have the negative connotation of spending all that time building horse units just to get into the enemy AI, and they're building walls, and your push is just neutralized on the spot. Aside from that, I think he is a pretty solid civ to play. The next leader brought before the council is going to be Qin Shi Huang of China. Now, China is another one of the OG civs, but they have really aged pretty well. They can build any wonders at any time from the ancient and classical era, and in all likelihood, you'd easily be able to get them. The extra build charge, as well as the fact that you can use those build charges to build wonders, means 2 builders, and you have a complete wonder with a couple charges left over. Dynastic Cycle does give you great boosts, but it is sort of hard to use for newer players, I'd say, because you have to actually get the Eurekas and Inspirations in order to make use of the 50% bonus instead of the 40% bonus. But the extra Eureka and Inspiration from Wonders are decently helpful, but they aren't anything game-changing. The Crouching Tiger is absolutely garbage. It's got a unit range of 1. It replaces the Crossbowman. It's just so... unit range of 1, even with high combat strength, you're still getting destroyed by knights and man-at-arms. Aside from that, the Great Wall is a little too restrictive in my opinion. It's really good if you could get a nice continuous segment. However, if you are able to get really large segments, that is a nice amount of gold, culture, and eventually tourism. Aside from that, China is amazing for culture, pretty good at science, but pretty bad for everything else. So with all that said, I am going to give them the B tier ranking. They're a very good civ. I'll put them under Wilhelmina because Wilhelmina is really a more jack-of-all-trades type of civ, and China isn't that good for a culture victory to where they'd be ahead of Wilhelmina. But again, I really wouldn't change anything about them. They're a pretty good civ, and they're not anything overbearing or too weak to play as. The next civ we are going to be talking about is Trajan of the Roman Empire, another OG civ. He has the best classical era unique unit. The Roman is not only insanely strong, but it can chop out more legions. Absolutely phenomenal. Aside from that, he has one of the best leader abilities, probably the best if we're being honest. A free monument in every city. That's 2 culture per city every time you settle immediately. Culture is very important in the early game. You want to get the colonization policy card, you want to get agro-gay, you want to get political philosophy, and with free monuments, you're just immediately going to be churning out that culture, not to mention the faith you'd get by going Void Singers and getting that unique monument. That is an absolute insane amount of culture and faith you would be getting. Aside from that, all roads lead to Rome is underrated. You get an immense amount of move speed, allowing you to build units from the far off reaches of your empire and immediately bringing them to the front lines a lot faster than usual. Aside from that, they are really good at early game war, easily get political philosophy for oligarchy, making their legions even stronger. Their unique unit, while expensive, is worth it, and unlike some other units we talked about like the Varu, being expensive doesn't really nullify them because they can make use of battering rams. Aside from that, the mobility from roads leading to Rome is good, and the Bath is just the cherry on top. This civ is probably one of the best in Civ 6, so I am going to put them in the S tier. I'll put them ahead of Alexander, but in my opinion, they still fall a little bit short of Frederick Barbarossa. Now, what I would do to change them, to make them a little bit more fair, is replace Trajan's column with a production to city centers buildings. The Romans were known for just building up cities, building up conquered territories, so instead of getting a free monument, give them a flat 15-20% boost to production towards city center buildings. It's better in the long term and probably is a better ability overall, but getting free monuments is just so broken in the early game, we have to replace that. Other than that, make it so that legions can't chop, have it so that they can build their forts, but their build charge doesn't really count as a build charge, and they're unable to chop out more legions. The seventh civ we're going to be ranking is Montezuma of the Aztec Empire. Now, Montezuma hasn't really aged that well, in my opinion. His leader ability is really hit or miss. Luxuries in his territories provide an amenity to 2 more cities, which is good. Military units receiving combat strength for each different luxury resource improved in Aztec lands is on the surface good, but a lot of the times you're going to be having to go out of your way to get these resources unless you get 3 or 4 mineable resources nearby that only require the mining technology. It really isn't as good as it seems. It's not going to be that effective until the mid to late game, really, so you have to sort of get lucky and hope that the enemy AI falls to your Eagle Warrior Rush. Aside from that, Legend of the Five Suns is their best ability, combined with the Eagle Warrior giving you builders on captured military units. Using those builders to build districts is a very good injection in your early game economy, allowing you to build whatever districts you want in whatever cities you want, so long as you get enough builders. He doesn't need to win an early war, which is a bonus. Like, as long as he declares war, steals a couple of builders, even if he doesn't take a city, Montezuma would still find amazing success from that early war due to the fact that Legend of the Five Suns allows him to spam build districts everywhere. Aside from that, the unique building is pretty much useless. You're already getting enough amenities. The culture and faith is meh. And the great general point is just, it doesn't matter at that point. Aside from that, the tourism you get from advancing to conservation is, you're not going to notice it at all. It's really a culture building for a culture victory type civ, but it's really the only sort of culture he does get from that. So there's really no good synergy in his kit. Due to all that, I am going to give him the C tier ranking. I'll put him ahead of Chandragupta. He has one really good ability, but aside from that, he doesn't have anything that stands out in a way. How I would change him is let him improve all luxury resources immediately. That would allow him to skip stuff like irrigation or sailing or anything like that. Let him improve those resources with builders immediately. Aside from that, make Eagle Warriors less expensive. If you're going to spam them out, they are a very expensive unit, and making them less expensive will allow him to do what he does best: raid in the early game, declare war on the first 10 or 20 turns, and steal more builders, thus fueling his unique approach to his economic situation. Number 8, we're going to be talking about the biggest winner of the April update in Civ 6. That is going to be Jayavarman the 7th, not 8th, the 7th of the Khmer. Now, he got a massive update in April. He got perfect River Goddess synergy. River Goddess gives you amenities and housing for holy sites next to rivers, and evidently Monasteries of Kings gives holy sites major adjacency with rivers, food equal to the adjacency bonus, and extra housing. So River Goddess and Jayavarman's Monasteries of King will allow you to get into double digits of housing immensely fast. Aside from that, he gets bonuses to amenities, housing, and food with all his abilities. Grand Berets and Monasteries of the King gives you the only 3 limiting factors for growth. What that means is, since he has everything needed to grow his cities, he is the easiest civ to grow his city to 10, 20 population, and that makes use of the Prasat. Bring in the unique building, a temple replacement, and it gives you tourism if the population is 10 or higher, and 20 tourism if the population is 20 or higher, not to mention the 6 faith, not to mention the 0.5 culture for every population. He is by far one of the best tourism victory civs in the entire game. It isn't even close, and while he might be sort of a one-trick pony, population can be used for science as well as getting more production for a domination victory, not to mention that with holy sites and prasats, he could do well in a religious victory, but culture victory, I would argue he is the best civ in the game. All that free tourism and culture, all that free population, housing, and amenities makes him a force to be reckoned with. He is going to be going to the S tier. I'll put him, I think, above. He's not as good as Germany. I don't think he's as good as Rome either, but he's better than Macedon for sure. So there is Jayavarman in the S tier. What I would do to balance him is remove the Domri's move and fire. I didn't even talk about the Domri. It's a trebuchet that moves and fires in the same turn and is a lot stronger. Remove the amenities he gets from aqueducts so that he only has housing and food instead of the trifecta for growth. Make him work on the food production a little bit. Aside from that, give the Prasats 10 and 15 tourism instead of 10 and 20, and have it so that there is no culture bonus. I think that would make them a lot more fair to play against. Next up on the list is Pachacuti, another really strong science and production civ. His abilities are pretty strong. He gets great food from traders, 1 food for every mountain tile, 4 domestic trade routes. The Mita terrace farms are absolutely insane, allowing you to make mountains workable, give them a lot of food and production, and make your terrace farms absolutely amazing. They have amazing food production, even better than the Khmer. They don't have any bonuses to housing and amenities really. They get 0.5 extra from terrace farms as opposed to regular farms, but aside from that, unlike Jayavarman, you do have to work a little bit harder to grow your population, but they're really not restricted to population as much as the Khmer. Their improvements are really not that great. The Kapong Nan allows you to travel through mountains, but it's really a niche situation type of thing. Aside from that, the Warcock, the skirmisher replacement, is great, but it is far off in the tech pack for what you want to be doing, which is going for a science victory. But if you decide to go for the Warcock, the extra attack per turn makes them a great defensive unit, not really offensive because they still only have 1 range, as is tradition for scout line units. All in all, I am going to probably go ahead and give them the A tier ranking. First A tier civ. If they got a bonus towards science or maybe housing and amenities, they'd in all likelihood be in the S tier, but they're really missing out on a few key characteristics to help with their population growth, and even then they don't really have any specific science bonuses, so they're still strong. A tier is very good and is needed of nerfs. Speaking of which, have it so that mountains provide a little less production and remove their food from trade routes. I think what I would do for their unique ability, have it so that they get maybe 0.5 food max from domestic trade routes, and have it so that they can get a maximum of 1 or 2 food. Already the domestic bonus is insane, especially the later the game goes on, and you really don't need that much food as the Incans. Number 10 on the list is going to be Bull Moose Teddy Roosevelt. He has immediate science and culture, massive science and culture in the early game, giving him lots of science when near a mountain, and lots of science for breathtaking tiles near a wonder or woods. Aside from that, we do have the Founding Fathers, which is amazing. All Diplo slots, which aren't a very good policy slot in general, are now converted to wildcard slots, which are the best policy cards. Aside from that, Diplo favor for every wildcard slot is immensely helpful in achieving a diplomatic victory. The P-51 Mustang sucks. It's not that much better than a regular fighter, and it comes too late in the game to really do anything. And even if it did come a little earlier on in the game and was more valuable, you would still have to deal with the fact that the AI doesn't build too many planes in the first place, so the difference between a regular fighter and a P-51 is almost negligible. Aside from that, the film studio is great for tourism. Double tourism pressure from all your cities towards other civs when the game enters the modern era is very effective and will allow you to catch up and take the lead in any tourism victory. Aside from that, he does have everything you need for tourism, all the culture from his antiquities and parks, as well as the film studio. Build a couple of wonders, national parks, keep your appeal up, and you'll win an easy culture victory. And hey, if not, you can just transition to a diplomatic victory. I am going to give him the A tier. I'll put him ahead of Pachacuti because he does have a victory type that he can go for, whereas Pachacuti just has bonuses towards food and production, which can be used towards a science victory or a culture victory, but he doesn't have the same, I guess, narrowness and advantage, I guess, that Teddy Roosevelt does. The only thing I do to nerf him is give him 1 science and 1 culture from breathtaking tiles. 2 and 2, in my opinion, is a little bit too much. 1 and 1 still makes him really good, but at the same time less overbearing, especially in the early game. For those of you astute viewers, you might have realized that I skipped out on Gorgo, and I would like to say that's a big brain play due to me trying to be specific in how I place my civ placement, but I completely forgot about it until right now. Now, they do have a number of problems. They're easy to play, and it's very easy to get +2 combat strength in the early game due to Thermopylae giving you 1 combat strength for every military policy slot, and the culture you get from victories, like we said, does allow you to beeline political philosophy a lot faster. The hoplites are underwhelming, and for a domination-centric civ who isn't really going to have a domination-unique unit, it really isn't the best. Now, the problem with hoplites is the fact that they're a spearman replacement, so they're automatically not very good. Aside from that, the 10 combat strength they get is limited to having to be beside another hoplite, but the real big problem is the fact that they can't make use of great generals. Aside from that, Acropolis is really good in fact, but it doesn't really synergize too well with Gorgo's playstyle. It's really more of a culture-centric, unique district. If it gave unit experience or great general points, that would be a little bit better, but it's cheaper to build, gives you an envoy, and gives you extra culture for being on hills and city centers, which is great, make no mistake about it, but it doesn't help Gorgo's domination-centric theme. So all in all, I am going to give her the C tier ranking. I'll put her under Chandragupta, honestly. The way I would make Gorgo better is to, number 1, make hoplites classical era unique units for great general usage, and other than that, let the Acropolis give gold or experience or anything like that. Maybe make it so that it gives 2 gold and all units trained in the city get a 25% bonus to experience. All that combined would make Gorgo a lot better. Although she's really not bad, she's just a little harder to make use of than all the other civs on the list, if that makes sense. And about Matthius Corvinus of Hungary, one of the most criminally underrated civs in the entire game. Raven King allows him to make use of levied units, the best tool in a domination victory. 2 movement speed and 5 combat strength is nothing short of gut-wrenching having to go up against. It costs less gold to upgrade, as well as less resources to upgrade levied units, and when you do levy, you get 2 envoys in a city-state, so the enemy AI can't just steal the city-state back. Pearl of the Danube is good, but it's a little too limited because it has to be across from the river on a city center. Thermal Bath is, again, decent. The amenities in production are pretty good, but the fact that you need to be near geothermal fissures to get more amenities and tourism really isn't the best thing in the world. It's not the greatest unique building, but it is still pretty solid for what it does. Now they're unique units. They have 2 of them, the Hussar and the Black Army. One of them is probably one of the best unique units in the entire game. Another is one of the worst. The Hungarian unique unit from the industrial era is the Hussar, which gets 3 combat strength for every active alliance. Now you might be asking yourself, hey, that's pretty good. What's so bad about that? The problem is when you go to the Black Army, which is on the same tech path, I guess, you can upgrade Black Armies into Hussars, so it seems pretty good, but the fact that Black Armies give combat strength for levied units means you're going to be going to war in the early and mid game, and with all the early war, you know, maybe you go for a swordsman rush with levies, get some Black Army units and go for a mid game rush. How many alliances are you really going to have by the time the Hussar comes out? Looking at all this, he has 2 amazing abilities, 2 decent abilities, and 1 that probably shouldn't even count as an ability. I'll put him in the B tier ahead of Wilhelmina. I want to put him in the A tier. I'll keep him in the B tier, I think, solely because I don't want to change anything about him. He isn't overbearing like Pachacuti or Bull Moose. There's really nothing I would change about him, so he's going to stick in the B tier, although it's B plus A minus tier. It would just depend on the given day. Already at number 13 on the list, we're going to be talking about Amanitore leading Nubia. Now, there's a lot I want to talk about here. The best district builder in the game. You get a base, 20% production towards all districts. You don't know how big that is. That is an insane amount of production to districts. And if you have a Nubian pyramid adjacent to the city center, one desert tile is all you need for the Nubian pyramids. They gain faith, food, and additional yields. You are going to be getting a 40% increase towards production to districts if you have a Nubian pyramid right beside the city center. They have the best archer production in the game. Their unique archer is more expensive, but Taseti gives you 30% production towards all ranged units, meaning your unique unit is actually cheaper to build than it is for other civs to build regular archers. All ranged units get 50% extra experience from combat. Add that in with oligarchy, and you're going to be getting promotions every 2 to 3 attacks. Let's get into the Patati archers. They are absolutely insane. They're stronger, extra movement speed, technically cheaper to build. You are going to be destroying the early game. No one can stop you in the first couple of turns. You are the best defensive civ in the game, and you are also one of the best offensive civs in the ancient era. Aside from that, they're one of the easiest civs to play. You could be an idiot and still learn to play a Minotaur. Aside from that, they do require a little bit of RNG. You need to get an adjacent desert tile to make use of the Nubian pyramid. But even if you don't get the 40% production towards districts, 20% is still more than enough. You might lack gold early on to upgrade from slingers to archers, so you're going to be building your unique archers from scratch, which is a little bit less ideal for the most part, but plugging them in on the list, they are an easy S tier. I'm going to go ahead and actually put them ahead of Jayavarman. I'm under Jayavarman, but ahead of Alexander. They do have massive district production, and their archers are so strong, you can make use of them in the medieval era, and you're going to be getting the tier 4 double attack promotion super early on as well, and the mobility does make them nothing short of fantastic. How I would change them: I'd remove archer experience so they don't get bonus experience towards archers, and instead I'd give 10 to 20% production towards districts instead of the 20 to 40 they have right now. Honestly, aside from that, there really is nothing too much to change. Next civ on the list is going to be Kupe of the Maui. Now, Kupe can settle the best possible locations due to his unique ability, which allows him to explore, get population, science, and culture while trying to find the best starting city. Now, he also gets free techs and buffed fishing boats, which are really good for an archipelago continents type of game. The unique building is pretty bad in my opinion. You get culture, faith, and I guess some tourism, but you can't get great works or great writers, which just turns me off, especially for a culture-focused civ. The Toa is a pretty decent unit, but the unique improvement is really just useless at this point. He has terrible tourism for a culture civ, and due to that, I am going to be putting him all the way in the low C tier under Gorgo. The one thing that would make him B tier and really good is to give him great writers and a slot in the unique building for great works of writing, because aside from that, he really is not the best culture civ in the game. Next civ on the list is going to be Jadwiga of Poland. I really don't know how to feel about her. She requires RNG with relics to have any sort of good early game. The religious ability she has is kind of useless. I mean, culture bombs are nice and all, but a couple missionaries can do the job just fine, honestly. Not to mention you need to build holy sites, encampments, which really aren't the ideal districts in the early game. Great wildcard slot, but it doesn't get Classical Republic, if that makes sense. A military slot turns into a wildcard slot, but Classical Republic doesn't have a military slot, so you can't really go Classical Republic, but Classical Republic is usually the best government to go, so that's kind of a bummer. Aside from that, Winged Hussars are a great unique unit, and they come at a perfect time for cavalry, where now you need cannons to tear down walls, and cavalry are better than infantry units. The market replacement in the Sukiinis is pretty good, honestly. Getting gold and production from trade routes is very helpful, but that's really their best ability in my opinion. They're not a very good civ. They're really suited for religious victory and nothing else, but they don't get a bonus towards founding a religion. Pretty much Civ 5 Byzantium syndrome. If you don't have a religion, they're kind of useless, and they're not even that good at getting a religion. So all in all, I am going to go ahead and put them in the C tier under Kupe. I would give them a free relic when they build their first holy site, and extra great people points with holy sites, kind of how Byzantium gets, as well as maybe a unique encampment that gives them a bonus towards faith generation. All that would make Poland, in my opinion, a very solid civ. Gandhi is a terrible civilization in Civ 6. I want to talk about his abilities and placement real quick because I have a unique way of implementing a fix. He gets an easy pantheon with his leader ability, which is nice, but that's really the only thing that's useful. Stepwells are decent, but they don't really give anything. They don't give too much food, honestly. Varus are strong but expensive, and Gandhi doesn't want to be at war with anyone. That counteracts his faith gain from his unique ability. Dharma might seem good on the surface, but if you're going for a religious victory because, he gets a lot of faith from his other abilities, you're not going to be having multiple followers in your cities due to the fact that to win a religious victory, you pretty much have to eradicate the majority of every religion. So honestly, on the tier list, he's going to be our first D tier civ. Now, about the unique way I'd fix him. Number one, give him a free pantheon when he meets a first civilization. That would be nice. Give Stepwells amenities like Cahokia Mounds because you're not getting a lot of amenities from Dharma due to the fact that you're not going to be having a lot of enemy religious pressure. But have it so that Gandhi has a unique mechanic. Have it so that his cities grow tall, and if he has more followers in his cities than the founder does in their cities, have it so that Gandhi technically converted a civ, if that makes sense. So if I'm Gandhi and I have more followers than, let's say, Poland has in her cities of her religion, I get Poland as a sort of converted city for my religious victory, and if my population is high enough, I could win a religious victory that way. That is a pretty, I think, innovative thing to do for Gandhi, and I feel like that would help him make use of Dharma a lot better towards religious victories. Next up is Mansa Musa of the Malian Empire. Now, Mansa Musa is a kind of unique civ. He has probably the worst early game of all time due to the fact that he gets a negative 30% production towards building units or building buildings. Aside from that, you really need Golden Age RNG to make use of his leader abilities, which might not happen every game. It's not very viable. Trade routes are good in desert cities, but again, you kind of need RNG to get some good desert tiles. Getting one desert city isn't really going to help you out too much. You really just need an expanse of desert to make use of Mali. Song of Jelly hampers you, but it is all in all a positive, giving you lots of faith and food from adjacent desert tiles. Mine receive less production and more gold, which is pretty nice, and that leads us into the Suguba. It lets you mass buy everything, which is really nice, allowing you to buy buildings, units for 20% cheaper with gold and faith, which is really nice, and it gets a lot of adjacency from holy sites, rivers, and from every 2 adjacent districts. The Mandakalu cavalry is meh. It's pretty good to prevent your units from being plundered, but honestly at that point you're really not going to have to worry about trade routes being plundered too much, as barbarians are pretty much dealt with for the most part. He gets going really later on, but early on he's just not very good. He's the worst early game civ, but he becomes one of the best civs later on when the gold production kicks up. So I am going to give him, all in all, I'll give him a high-ish C tier ranking. I'll put him under Gorgo, I think. The thing that would make Mali a lot better, in my opinion, is have it so that the production is negative 10% instead of negative 30%, and give him 1 trade route capacity, and everything becomes 10% cheaper for every golden age to buy with gold. So for example, if you get 3 golden ages in a game, all things will be 30% cheaper to buy with gold. So it sort of keeps the bad early game, but he would then have one of the best late games where everything is so cheap that he could just outright buy it. Next up on the list is everyone's favorite punching bag, Tamar of Georgia. Now, Tamar has been a lot better than she was before the April update, so she isn't really as much of a meme civ anymore. You still need RNG with barbarians to get enough faith to get a good pantheon early on. you have decent envoy placement, but that does require you to have a city-state converted to your religion. Aside from that, strength and unity really is not helpful at all, in my opinion. It's unless you're doing dramatic ages, it requires a lot to make use of. You're going to need golden ages, which again isn't that easy to come by, so you might have some games where you don't get a golden age, or maybe some games where you're always in a golden age. Aside from that, the production towards defensive buildings might be decent if the Sikh wasn't such a bad unique building. Not only do you need ancient walls and medieval walls, which aren't going to give you anything to get the Sikh, but all it gives is extra faith. And when you're in a golden age, your tourism and faith are doubled, which is, again, a little bit RNG for Georgia. The Kevser is a good unique unit now because you can upgrade into it. The fighting bonus in hills is decent, as well as extra mobility is always nice on hills. She's really split between a diplomatic, religious, and cultural civ, but she really isn't that good in any of those victory types. I'm going to put her in the D tier. I think she's worse than Gandhi by a little bit, but honestly what I would change about her is when she is suzerain of a city-state, or when she gets suzerainty, have it so that they automatically convert to her religion, so that she gets more envoys when you put it in. Aside from that, every city-state converted to your religion now gives you 1 diplo favor to help her towards a diplomatic victory. Give it so that kills instead of giving faith. They also give great profit points, allowing her to get a religion, which is one of her biggest weaknesses. She doesn't have any great person generation for great profits, unlike Arabia or Basil of Byzantium. Other than that, honestly, walls give 1 extra diplo favor each instead of having to go monarchy, and make her a sort of religious diplo civ with a more emphasis on a diplomatic victory. The penultimate civ we are now going to be talking about is Gilgabro, Gilgamesh, Gilgachad, whatever you want to call him, because when he is in your game, you are going to have a good time. At least when he's your ally instead of your civ you're playing. He doesn't have the best abilities. Adventures of Enkidu could be really helpful, but it's too late for war carts. Combat strength against wars with people you're allied with is pretty good, so if you're allied with someone and you're both at war and you have a military alliance, that's like 8 to 9 combat strength if I remember correctly, which is super massive. But it really comes too late for war cards, so he doesn't have a unique unit to make Adventures of Enkidu a lot better. Aside from that, Epic Quests is immensely helpful, but you need Barbarian RNG, and you have to get the last hit on an encampment, which, doesn't happen all the time. The war cards are very strong, and the strongest unit until Swordsman and walls from the start of the game. After walls, they become useless, but since they're unlocked at the super early game, literally from turn 1, you could go for an early rush and take out maybe even a couple of civs in the early game. The Ziggurat is an amazing unique improvement, but it takes slots that you would want to build districts on, maybe farms and mines, so it isn't as game-changing as you would think. Aside from that, you do need to snowball early on with an early war, because after the first 30 to 40 turns, that's it. You got Ziggurats and Adventures of Enkidu. Half your abilities are honestly just useless after the first 50 turns, and you also need to get allies in the mid to late game, which is kind of difficult if you are going to be warmongering with war carts, so it's sort of a dynamic between you can either go for a really good early game or a really good mid to late game. On the tier list, I am going to be giving them a B ranking under China, almost C tier. Wouldn't really change anything about them. They're good as is. It might have seemed like I was sort of shit-talking them a little bit, but honestly, Gilgamesh could split me in half, so I kind of have to put him in the B tier. In all honesty, though, he is definitely good enough to be a B tier civ. Now, this video is getting super long, so Robert the Bruce will be the last person we talk about today. I'll do the other civs by the time next week comes out. I hope you guys can keep patient until then, and subscribe and ring the notification bell so you don't miss the next videos. But Robert the Bruce is one of the weirdest civs in a way. His Liberation War is extremely situational, because not only do you have to go to war with a warmonger, but he also has to take a city, and that city has to be taken from one of your allies. Scottish Enlightenment is game-changing, but it's way too hard to make use of. Happy cities are having positive amenities. Ecstatic cities are having, I think it's 3 or 5 amenities per city, which is extremely hard to get in this game. Highlander is the worst unique unit in the entire game by far. It's a ranger, and it isn't even a very good one, so just ignore it if you're playing Scotland. The golf course is one of the best unique improvements, actually, giving you amenities, gold, and culture if adjacent to a city center district, so they do help you get the happy and ecstatic amenities that you need. However, golf courses only work once per city, and they can't be placed on deserts. Give them a B tier ranking. I'll put them ahead of, I think ahead of China, but under Wilhelmina. If everything goes right, they're an S tier civ, but if everything goes wrong, they're an F tier civ. So that's really what my position is on Scotland. Bannockburn, I think the best way to change them is have it so that you could get Bannockburn with a protectorate war as well instead of a war of liberation. Have it be war of liberation and protectorate wars so you can get allied to a city-state, lose the city-state, and then have a more reliable way to declare the war. And also give them a special casus belli for defending allied civs.